Hollis had made exactly 3 mistakes that morning, and the third one was currently staring at her with eyes that reflected light like polished obsidian. Well, staring was perhaps too gentle a word. The creature was assessing her, the way a butcher might assess a particularly interesting cut of meat, which, from its perspective, was probably accurate. Mistake number 1. Leaving the observation platform without a backup comm unit. Mistake number 2. Thinking she could outrun a dust storm on Gossamer Ridge. And mistake number 3. The real masterpiece of poor decision-making. Ducking into what she thought was a cave for shelter, only to realize, too late, naturally, that it was occupied. By Raxlon cubs. 3 of them. Now, to be fair to Hollis, who was a wildlife behavioral specialist and not, despite current evidence to the contrary, a complete idiot, Raxlon cubs looked almost cute from a distance. All big eyes and uncertain movements, like oversized house cats who hadn't quite grown into their paws. But up close? Up close, you could see the rows of teeth designed to shear through bone, the retractable claws that scored marks in solid rock, and the 6 limbs that could tear apart a security drone in under 30 seconds. She'd timed it once, for research purposes. The cubs had arranged themselves in a loose semicircle around her, blocking the den entrance without actually appearing threatening. It was the kind of strategic positioning that made Hollis's hindbrain scream about pack hunting tactics, while her forebrain tried desperately to remember the Raxlon peaceful greeting gesture. Was it the head tilt? Or was that submission? God, she couldn't remember. And the quarterly interspecies protocol briefings were suddenly seeming a lot more important in retrospect. "Hello," she tried, keeping her voice level. "I'm just passing through. Shelter from the storm. I'll leave as soon as it clears." 3 sets of eyes blinked at her in unison. Their pupils were slitted, like Earth's reptiles, but the intelligence behind them was unmistakable and deeply unnerving. The smallest one, scales fading from deep purple to silver along its spine, tilted its head. Not the Raxlon greeting, just curiosity. "You are human?" it asked in universal standard, the words clicking and hissing through a mouth not designed for humanoid speech. "Yes," Hollis confirmed, trying to calculate how long the storm would last versus how long before the cubs' parents returned home. Neither timeline was comforting. "Hollis," she added, because if she was going to be eaten, the least she could do was introduce herself properly. The largest cub, built like a tank with scales the color of dried blood, made a rumbling sound that might have been thoughtful. "I am Polmi. This is Hernucht," indicating a sleek, amber-scaled individual, "and Blixnor, the smallest one." Great. Now she knew their names. That would make excellent footnote material for whoever wrote up the incident report. The 3 cubs exchanged glances, and Hollis was struck by how coordinated they seemed. Raxlon were supposed to be intensely competitive, even within family units. Every resource fought over, every scrap of food contested. The behavioral literature was very clear on this point. So why did these 3 look like they were having a silent conversation? Hernkut moved closer, not prowling exactly, but not prowling either. Hollis held perfectly still. Prey animals ran. She wasn't prey. She was a sentient being having a peaceful encounter with 3 juvenile apex predators in their home without invitation during a dust storm. She was so dead. "We have question," Hernucht said, settling onto their haunches in a pose that looked almost relaxed. "Almost." "Okay," Hollis managed. Questions were good. Questions meant talking. Talking meant not eating. "What is?" Blixnor started, then paused, clearly searching for the right word. What is sharing? Of all the things Hollis had expected, threats, territorial challenges, demands that she leave immediately, this wasn't even on the list. Sharing? She repeated, wondering if she'd misheard. Yes. Polmy leaned forward, genuinely interested. We hear adults talk about humans. They say humans do sharing, that humans give resources to others, not family, not trading, just give. The way Polmy said it made it sound like a bizarre perversion, something fundamentally wrong with the natural order of things. They say is weakness, Hernicht added. But we hear something else. We hear humans are dangerous. Very dangerous. Those obsidian eyes fixed on her. Weak things are not dangerous, so we are confused. Hollis felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, which was probably hysteria, but she'd take it. Here she was, trapped in a den with 3 predators who could kill her without breaking stride, and they wanted a philosophical discussion about resource distribution. Well, she said slowly, her mind racing, how did you explain sharing to creatures whose entire culture was built on competition? Sharing isn't weakness. It's a different kind of strength. 3 heads tilted in synchronized confusion. Right. That explanation was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Hollis glanced around the den. It was larger than she'd initially thought, carved into the rock with the kind of precision that spoke to generations of use. The walls were scored with claw marks, territorial markers, probably, or maybe just sharpening posts. In one corner, she could see a pile of what looked like bones, thoroughly cleaned. Charming. The storm howled outside, dust particles creating an opaque curtain across the entrance. She wasn't getting out of here anytime soon, which meant she had time. Time to either dig herself deeper into this bizarre situation, or possibly, just possibly, turn it into something other than a tragic footnote in the annals of human Raxlon relations. You want to know what sharing is? She asked. All 3 cubs leaned forward. I can show you, Hollis said, and immediately wondered if this was mistake number 4, or if she'd stopped counting. She slowly reached for her pack, slowly, because sudden movements around predators were a great way to trigger chase instincts, and set it on the ground in front of her. The cubs watched with rapt attention as she unsealed it. Inside, 6 nutrient bars, 3 water capsules, an emergency medical kit, a broken comm unit, useless, and 1 geological sample she'd picked up that morning. The sample was a cluster of blue crystals, pretty enough that her magpie human brain had gone, ooh, shiny, and stuffed it in her pack. Hollis pulled out a nutrient bar and unwrapped it. The cubs' nostrils flared. They could smell the concentrated proteins and sugars. I have 6 of these, she said. I need maybe 2 to get back to base once the storm clears. She broke 1 bar into 3 pieces, which means I have extra. She held out the pieces, 1 toward each cub. Nobody moved. Blixnor's eyes narrowed. Is poisoned? No. Is trick? Hernicht asked. No trick. Polmy rumbled, confused. Then why you give? You need food. We are strangers. We could take all food. You could, Hollis agreed. But you haven't. You're just asking questions. So I'm answering by showing you what sharing means. She kept her hands extended, waiting. Hernicht moved first, lightning fast, snatching the piece from her hand. Hollis managed not to flinch as those teeth came within millimeters of her fingers. The cub retreated, sniffed the food suspiciously, then ate it in 1 bite. The reaction was immediate. Hernicht's eyes widened. This is very good. Polemy took the next piece, more carefully. Then Blixnor, watching Hollis's face the entire time, as if trying to solve a puzzle. You really just Give this, Blixnor said, around a mouthful of nutrient bar. For nothing. Not for nothing, Hollis corrected. For information. Now I know you like human food. Now I know you won't bite my fingers off when I offer something. Now you know I'm not a threat. She paused. See? Everyone benefits. That's sharing. The three cubs looked at each other, then back at her, then at each other again. This is very strange, Poholmi announced. Welcome to humanity, Hollis muttered, pulling out a water capsule. She took a drink. The cubs needed to see it wasn't poisoned. Apparently they were very concerned about poisoning, then held it out. This time, there was less hesitation. The capsule made its way from cub to cub, each taking a careful drink. Hollis watched them, her researcher brain kicking into gear despite the circumstances. They were sharing the water capsule among themselves. Passing it? Not fighting over it? That wasn't normal Raxalon behavior. Not according to any literature she'd read. Can I ask you something? She ventured. Harnked, nodded. Do you three always work together like this? Passing things, taking turns? The cubs exchanged what could only be called guilty looks. Is secret, Blixnor admitted quietly. Adults say we must compete, must fight for resources. But we? The cub trailed off. We are clutchmates, Polmi explained. We hatched together, learned to hunt together. We are stronger together. But this is wrong, Hernacht added quickly. According to teaching. So we hide it. Hollis felt something twist in her chest. These cubs had independently figured out cooperation and had to hide it because their culture said it was weakness. God, no wonder the Raxalon and humans had such a hard time with diplomatic relations. They saw human cooperation as aberrant behavior, while humans saw Raxalon competition as needlessly brutal. She reached back into her pack and pulled out the blue crystal cluster. The reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. All three cubs froze. That particular predator stillness that meant every muscle was locked, ready to explode into motion. Their eyes fixed on the crystals like targeting lasers. Oh, Hollis said softly. This is important, isn't it? Important, Blixnor's voice came out as barely a whisper. That is Hernxi. The word didn't translate in Hollis's earpiece, which meant it was either culturally specific or so sacred that universal standard hadn't bothered with an equivalent. We have only seen in stories, Polemi said, edging closer but not quite approaching. From homeworld, deep caverns, where ancestors lived. Hernkt made a low keening sound. For coming-of-age ritual, when cubs become hunters, elders place Hernxi in center of gathering. New hunters must approach, touch it, speak their oath. Hollis looked down at the crystal cluster in her hands. It had seemed pretty that morning, blue shot through with veins of silver, catching the light in interesting ways. She'd grabbed it from a rock formation near the observation post, thinking it might look nice on her workstation. She'd picked up a sacred cultural artifact because it was shiny. Perfect. Just perfect. I didn't know, she said honestly. I found it this morning. I just thought it was pretty. You found it, Blixnor repeated slowly. On this world? Yes, about 5 kilometers from here, near the canyon ridge. The three cubs looked at each other, and Hollis was getting better at reading their expressions. That was excitement mixed with something like awe. Hernxi grows here, Hernacht breathed. On Gossamer Ridge. We did not know. Adults did not know. They will be so surprised, Polemi added. Hollis turned the crystal over in her hands, watching the light play through it. A thought occurred to her, probably a terrible thought, given her track record today. But then again, she was already committed to the chaos. "Would you like to hold it?" she asked. 3 pairs of eyes snapped to her face. "What?" Blixnor asked. "Would you like to hold it?" Hollis repeated, extending the crystal cluster toward them. "It's not mine. I mean, I picked it up, but I don't need it. And it clearly means more to you than it does to me." "You would give this to us?" Hernkt's voice was shaking. Actually shaking. "That's what sharing means," Hollis said gently. "Recognizing when something has value to someone else and choosing to let them have it." Polmy shook their head slowly. "No, this is too much. This is not small thing like food. This is sacred. This is worth—" The cub paused, clearly doing calculations. "This is worth more than many hunts. More than territory. This could be traded for—" "I don't want to trade it," Hollis interrupted. "I want to give it to you, if you want it." The silence that followed was so complete that Hollis could hear the dust storm raging outside, could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her ears, could hear the soft rasp of the cub's breathing. Blixnor moved first, slowly approaching Hollis with steps so careful they barely made sound. The cub extended one clawed hand, hesitated, then gently, so gently, touched the crystal cluster. The reaction was immediate. Blixnor's scales rippled with color, purple darkening to almost black, then lightening to silver. A purr started deep in the cub's chest, growing louder. Hernkt and Polmy crowded in, each touching the crystal, and suddenly all 3 cubs were vibrating with that purring sound that made Hollis's teeth rattle. Then, as one, they pulled back. "We cannot accept," Blixnor said, and Hollis could hear the regret in those words. "This is too valuable. We have nothing to give in return. Sharing means," the cub glanced at Hollis, "everyone benefits. Yes? We would benefit. You would not. I'd benefit from knowing you have something that makes you happy," Hollis said, then felt ridiculous for saying something so sentimental to 3 predators who could probably recite the most efficient way to disembowel prey. But Hernkt tilted their head, considering. "Happiness is benefit? Among humans? Yes, we're weird like that." The 3 cubs huddled together, their heads touching, and began making sounds that didn't translate, clicks and hisses and rumbles that must have been their own language. Hollis watched, fascinated despite her situation. This was cooperative decision-making behavior. This was consensus building. This was everything the literature said Raxilon didn't do. The behavioral research community was going to lose its collective mind if she ever got to report this. When, she corrected herself, when she got to report this, positive thinking. The huddle broke apart. Polemy looked at her with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. "We must reciprocate." "Yes? That is word. If you share, we must share." "You don't have to," Hollis started. "Wait," Blixnor commanded, then disappeared deeper into the den. Hollis waited, very aware that Hernkt and Polmy were still between her and the exit. Not threateningly, just present. The storm was starting to die down outside. She could see slightly more than half a meter through the entrance now, which meant the cubs' parents could be back any time, which meant she really needed to wrap up this cultural exchange and get back to base before she had to explain to 2 adult Raxilon why she was in their home teaching their offspring about sharing. Blixnor returned, carrying something in their mouth. The cub's jaw was clenched carefully, precisely, the way you'd carry something fragile and precious. The cub set it down in front of Hollis. It was a rock, not a crystal cluster, not a gem, not anything objectively valuable. Just a smooth, gray rock about the size of Hollis's fist, worn down by time or water or handling until it was almost perfectly round. "This is ours," Blixner said quietly. "Most important thing we have." Hollis looked from the rock to the three cubs, who were watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "We found it," Runkt explained, "on our first hunt play. Outside den. All three of us touched it at same time." "Mother said we could keep it," Polmy added, and there was wonder in that statement. Usually, Mother destroys distraction objects, says they make cubs weak, but she let us keep this one. "We take turns holding it," Blixner continued. "When scared, when lonely, when storm comes, and we wait for parents to return." The weight of what they were offering settled on Hollis like a physical thing. This wasn't just a rock. This was a symbol of their cooperation, their secret bond, the thing that kept them connected when everything in their culture told them to compete. "I can't take this," Hollis said, her throat tight. "This is yours. This is important to you." "Yes," Hernicht agreed. "Very important. That is why we give it. You gave us Hernichsai. Sacred thing. We give you sacred thing." "But you need this," Hollis protested, feeling absurd arguing about a rock while three predators insisted she take it. "You gave when you did not need to give," Polemy said. "We give when we do not want to give. This is sharing." "Yes?" Hollis opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The logic was simultaneously flawed and perfect, and she couldn't quite articulate why. "This is correct?" Blixner asked, uncertainty creeping into the cub's voice. "We understand sharing now?" Hollis looked at the three cubs, these apex predators who had independently figured out cooperation and were now offering her their most treasured possession because she'd been stupid enough to give them a shiny rock, and felt something crack in her professional detachment. "Yes," she said softly, reaching out to pick up the gray stone. It was warm from being carried in Blixnor's mouth, smooth against her palm. "This is exactly right. This is sharing." The three cubs began purring again, that diesel engine rumble that shook the air. And that's when two massive shadows blocked the den entrance. The adult Raxilon had returned home. Hollis had thought the cubs were large. The cubs were kittens compared to their parents. The female had to be the mother, given the way the cubs' scent markers suddenly spiked with recognition, was easily twice the size of her offspring, muscles rippling under scales that looked like they could deflect small arms fire. She was carrying something in her jaws, something that had probably been alive that morning and was very definitely not alive now. The male was somehow larger, built like a biological tank, with scars crisscrossing his hide that spoke of a long and violent life. Both of them were staring at Hollis. Both of them had stopped purring. The silence stretched out like pulled taffy, getting thinner and more fragile with each passing second. Hollis stood slowly. Sudden movements, bad idea, and kept her hands visible. The gray rock felt like a talisman in her palm, though she wasn't sure what god she was supposed to be praying to in this situation. The cubs, bless their terrifying little hearts, rushed forward in a tumbling mass of scales and limbs, all talking at once in their clicking language. Hollis caught fragments through her translator. Human, sharing, storm, Hernsey. But the rapid-fire dialect was too much for the device to parse clearly. The mother set down her kill with deliberate care, never taking her eyes off Hollis. Then she approached, each step measured and precise. Hollis's hindbrain was screaming at her to run, but her forebrain knew that running was the worst possible option. So she stood there, holding a rock, trying to look non-threatening, while a creature that could snap her spine like a twig came closer. The mother stopped just outside arm's reach and lowered her head, scenting the air. Her nostrils flared, taking in Hollis's smell, the cub's smell, the mingled scent of the den. Then she did something Hollis absolutely did not expect. She looked at the rock in Hollis's hand. Her eyes widened, not much, just a fraction, but enough that Hollis caught it. The mother's head swiveled to look at her cubs, who were now clustered together, holding the blue crystal cluster between them like a trophy. Back to Hollis. Back to the cubs. Back to the rock. Hollis saw the exact moment the mother understood what had happened. "You teach my cubs," the mother said in universal standard, her accent thick but understandable. "Sharing." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered in a tone that Hollis couldn't quite read. Was that approval? Disapproval? Murderous rage carefully contained? Yes, Hollis managed. They asked what it meant. I showed them. The father made a sound like grinding boulders. Hollis nearly jumped out of her skin before realizing, hoping, desperately hoping, that it was laughter. "Human gives sacred hernsai to cubs," he rumbled. "Cubs give favorite rock to human." Another grinding sound. "This is most ridiculous thing I hear this season." The mother's tail lashed once, twice. Then she sat back on her haunches, a pose that looked almost relaxed. If you ignored the casual way, she could probably kill everything in a 5-meter radius. "You are Hollis," she said. Not a question. "Yes?" "I am Herncole. This is Grolix." She indicated the male with a flick of her tail. "You are researcher. We know of you. We permit observation." "I appreciate that," Hollis said, feeling surreal. She was having a conversation with adult Raxilon while holding their cub's favorite rock. "I didn't mean to intrude. The storm brings many things," Herncole interrupted. "Sometimes prey, sometimes danger." Those obsidian eyes fixed on Hollis. "Sometimes teachers." Hollis blinked. I wasn't trying to teach. They just asked, and I..." "You answered with action, not words," Grolix said, moving to sit beside his mate. The two of them together took up most of the den space. "This is good teaching. Words are wind. Action is truth." Blixnor chirped something in their own language. Herncole responded, a rapid exchange that made all 3 cubs droop slightly. "I tell them they cannot keep Hernxi," Herncole said to Hollis. "Must give to elders, for community is tradition." The cubs looked devastated, but they didn't argue. Hollis felt her heart clench watching them carefully set down the crystal cluster. "However," Herncole continued, and the cubs perked up immediately, "I also tell them that they found Hernxi on this world. They will be honored for discovery. They will be permitted to carry it to elders themselves. This is great honor for cubs so young." The purring started again, all 3 cubs vibrating with joy. Grolix leaned forward slightly, studying Hollis. "You understand what you did?" "I gave them a rock I found," Hollis offered weakly. "You gave them proof that cooperation has value," Grolix said. "In culture that says only competition matters, you showed them that sharing with stranger can bring benefit to all." "This is dangerous teaching," Herncole added, but there was something in her tone that suggested she didn't entirely disapprove. "Could disrupt tradition. Could change how cubs see world." Hollis swallowed hard. "I'm sorry if I..." "Do not apologize," Herncole cut her off. "I did not say teaching was wrong. I said teaching was dangerous." She paused. "Dangerous things are not always bad things." The mother stood and approached Hollis again, close enough now that Hollis could see the individual scales, the old scars, the raw power contained in that form. Herncole looked down at the gray rock in Hollis's hands. "My cubs give you their heartstone," she said quietly. "This is not small thing. This is not child's toy. This is symbol of their bond, their secret cooperation, the thing that keeps them strong when world tells them to be alone." "I know," Hollis whispered. "That's why I tried to refuse." "But they insisted." Herncole's tail swayed gently. "Because you taught them that sharing means giving what is valuable, not what is useless. They learned well." The mother reached out one clawed hand. Hollis tried very hard not to flinch, and gently touched the rock Hollis held. "You keep this," Herncole said. "You keep their trust, their gift, their first attempt at reciprocity." She withdrew her hand. "And in return, you give them story they will tell for rest of their lives. Story of human who shared sacred stone, who taught them new way of being strong." Grolix made that grinding boulder laugh again. "You also give us many headaches when other parents ask why our cubs suddenly want to share prey with clutchmates." "That's already happening?" Hollis asked. "Polemy shared kill practice with weaker cub yesterday," Herncole said. "Caused much confusion. Other parents say we raise cubs wrong. We say we raise cubs different." She bared her teeth in what might have been a smile, or might have been a threat display. Time will tell which is correct. The storm outside had died to a whisper. Hollis could see clear sky through the den entrance now. "You should go," Herncole said, not unkindly, "before storm returns, before you make more dangerous teachings." Hollis nodded, clutching the gray rock. She looked at the three cubs, who were carefully cleaning the crystal cluster with their tongues, preparing it for presentation to the elders. "Thank you," she said, "for not eating me, and for this." She held up the rock. "Thank you," Blixenor said solemnly, "for showing us sharing. For giving us Hernsey," Hernkt added. "For teaching us that being strong together is not weakness," Polmy finished. Hollis felt her eyes sting and told herself it was just dust from the storm. She made her way to the den entrance, Herncole and Grolix watching her go. At the threshold, she paused. "Researcher Hollis," Herncole called. Hollis turned. "You are welcome in our den," the mother said. "Always. This is rare thing. For human. For anyone, not family. You understand?" "I understand," Hollis said. "Thank you." She stepped out into the clearing air, holding a gray rock that 3 predator cubs had given her, and started the walk back to base. She had a report to file that nobody was going to believe. 3 months felt like 3 years when you were sitting in front of the Interspecies Behavioral Consortium, trying to explain why a rock had become the most important geological sample in the sector. Hollis stood at the podium in the main auditorium of Station Meridian, looking out at an audience that included representatives from 18 different species, half the leading xenoanthropologists in known space, and, most terrifyingly, one Raxilon ambassador who had specifically requested to attend. The gray rock sat in a suspension field case on the table beside her, rotating slowly under gentle amber light. She'd submitted it for analysis twice. Both times, the reports came back the same. Sedimentary stone, common silicate composition, no unusual properties. Approximate age 200,000 years, smoothed by water erosion. In other words, just a rock. She'd kept it anyway. "The preliminary reports I submitted," Hollis began, gripping the podium to keep her hands steady, "generated significant interest in the behavioral research community. I'm here today to present the complete findings and, more importantly, the follow-up observations that have emerged over the past 90 days. The lights dimmed, the holo display activated behind her, showing the recorded footage she'd compiled. "This is Hernkt, Blixnor, and Polmi," she said, as 3 Raxilon cubs appeared on screen, notably larger than they'd been 3 months ago. Aged approximately 9 standard years at first contact, now approaching adolescence. The footage showed the cubs working together to bring down a simulation prey drone, standard hunting practice for young Raxilon. But instead of fighting over the kill as traditional behavior predicted, they were dividing it into portions. "Equal portions," the audience murmured. This cooperative hunting behavior began approximately 1 week after our initial encounter, Hollis continued. It has since spread to 4 other cubs in their clan group. More footage. 6 cubs now, sharing a kill, taking turns feeding, watching each other's backs. "Now, here's where it gets interesting," Hollis said, switching to the next clip. "This is from 5 weeks post-contact. The cubs' parents, Hernkol and Grolix, permitted me to set up observation equipment near their territory. The new footage showed adult Raxlon, a hunting party of 5, watching the cubs practice cooperative hunting. The adults were clearly arguing, their body language sharp and aggressive, but they weren't stopping the cubs. Traditional Raxlon child rearing involves heavy intervention when cubs display non-competitive behavior, Hollis explained. Adults typically destroy shared resources and forcibly separate cubs who cooperate too frequently. The thinking is that this prepares them for adult life, where resources are scarce and competition is survival." She paused, letting that sink in. Hernkol and Grolix did not intervene. When questioned, Hernkol stated, and I quote, "Cubs are more efficient hunters together. Efficiency is strength. Strength is not weakness." The murmuring grew louder. A Threen representative raised a crystalline appendage. "Yes," Hollis acknowledged. "You are suggesting," the Threen said in their melodic voice, "that a single interaction fundamentally altered generational behavioral patterns." "I'm suggesting," Hollis corrected, "that the behavioral patterns were already shifting. The cubs had independently developed cooperative strategies and were hiding them because they believed such behavior was forbidden. What I did was demonstrate that cooperation was permissible, that it had value recognized by another sentient species." She clicked to the next slide, a graph showing hunting success rates. The cooperative cubs show a 38% increase in successful hunts compared to their competition-focused peers. They sustain fewer injuries. They're developing more complex strategic thinking, and, she clicked again, they're happier. The new image showed biochemical analysis of stress hormones. Cortisol analogs are down 22% in cooperative cubs versus control group. They're experiencing less chronic stress, better social bonding, improved overall health. A Norellian scholar stood, their fur rippling with agitation. "But you cannot claim causation from a single variable. These cubs may simply be genetically predisposed to cooperative behavior." "Fair point," Hollis acknowledged, "which is why I'm not claiming genetic predisposition. I'm claiming cultural permission." She switched to footage of other species, young Norellians sharing food, Threen hatchlings pooling resources, even a group of notoriously solitary Grixilon juveniles working together on a construction project. This data comes from behavioral specialists across 12 colonies. In each case, juvenile members of traditionally competitive species have begun exhibiting increased sharing and cooperative behaviors following cultural exchange programs with human settlements. The room went silent. "You're saying humans are infectious?" someone called from the back. Hollis couldn't help but smile. In a manner of speaking, yes, but not because we're special, because we're shameless. She clicked to a comparison chart. Most species restrict sharing behavior to immediate family units or engage in strictly transactional resource exchange. Humans share with strangers. We share with rivals. We share with other species. We do it constantly, reflexively, often to our own detriment. She gestured to the rock in its case. We share sacred cultural artifacts because they're shiny and someone else might like them. That got a few laughs. What I observed with Hernkt, Blixnor, and Polmi wasn't me teaching them something new. It was me giving them permission to acknowledge something they already knew. That cooperation works. That sharing resources can benefit everyone involved. That strength doesn't have to mean standing alone. Hollis pulled up the final piece of footage, the three cubs, now gangly adolescents, presenting the blue crystal cluster to a gathering of Raxlon elders. The ceremony was formal, ritualistic, and the cubs were clearly terrified. But they were doing it together. All three touching the crystal. All three speaking the traditional words. All three being honored as discoverers. The elders accepted the Hernxie and praised the cubs for their find, Hollis said quietly. But more than that, they acknowledged that the cubs' cooperation led to the discovery, that working together allowed them to range farther, explore more territory, take risks that individual cubs couldn't. The elder on screen, ancient, scarred, terrifying, placed a claw on each cub's head in turn. And then, Hollis continued, the elder said something that I think represents a fundamental shift in Raxlon cultural perspective. She let the audio play. The elder's voice was like gravel in a rock slide. Cooperation is tool, like claw, like tooth. Tool can be strength or weakness depending on how it is used. These cubs use cooperation as strength. This is wisdom. The footage ended. The lights came back up. The audience sat in stunned silence. Hollis took a breath. I'm not here to claim that one interaction changed an entire species. That would be absurd. What I'm proposing is that many species have the capacity for cooperation and sharing, but cultural frameworks determine whether that capacity is encouraged or suppressed. She gestured to the rock again. This object has no intrinsic value. It's a rock. But three cubs gave it to me because they understood, perhaps for the first time in their lives, that giving something precious could create a bond stronger than possession. That sharing wasn't about weakness or loss, but about connection. The Threen representative spoke again. And the implications for interspecies relations? Vast, Hollis admitted. If cultural exchange can modify behavioral frameworks at the juvenile level, then long-term integration becomes not just possible, but likely. The cubs who learn cooperation now will be the adults making policy decisions in 20 years. This could be weaponized, a Grixalon observer noted darkly. Cultural manipulation, behavioral engineering. It could, Hollis agreed, which is why transparency is critical. I'm not advocating for forced cultural change. I'm advocating for exposure to alternative frameworks and letting individuals choose which behaviors serve them best. A hand went up in the back, sleek, scaled, unmistakably Raxlon. Hollis's heart skipped. Yes, Ambassador? The Raxlon ambassador stood, and the room somehow found a way to get quieter. Herncole cut an imposing figure in the formal diplomatic chamber, her scales polished to high gloss, traditional honor markings painted across her shoulders. Wait, Herncole. The cub's mother was the Raxlon ambassador. Researcher Hollis, Herncole said in flawless universal standard. My offspring request to know, do you still have the rock? Every eye in the auditorium turned to Hollis. She reached over and deactivated the suspension field, lifting the gray stone from its case. Yes, I carry it with me. Why? Herncole asked. It has no value. You said this yourself. Why keep worthless rock? Hollis turned the stone over in her hands, feeling its familiar weight, its smoothness. Because it represents the moment 3 cubs chose connection over isolation. Because it's a reminder that the most valuable things we can give each other aren't resources or territory or power. They're trust and understanding and the willingness to be vulnerable. She looked directly at Herncole. And because they asked me to keep it, so I do. Herncole's tail swayed gently. My offspring worry you have forgotten them. I tell them, impossible. Humans never forget those who share. She moved down the aisle with that liquid predator grace, approaching the podium. The security detail tensed, but Herncole ignored them entirely. She stopped in front of Hollis and reached into a pouch at her side. Hernkert Blixnor and Polimi send message, she said, pulling out a small hollow recorder. They wish you to see. Hollis activated the recording. 3 adolescent Raxlon appeared, arranged around the blue crystal cluster which now sat in a place of honor, in what looked like a communal den. They were bigger, sleeker, their juvenile awkwardness giving way to the deadly efficiency of young hunters. But they were together. Blixnor spoke first. Researcher Hollis, we practice sharing. Is difficult. Others mock us, say we are weak. But we are not weak, Hernkert continued. We are stronger together. We hunt better. We learn faster. We protect each other. Polimi leaned forward. Other cubs watch us. Some try cooperation. Some are punished by parents. But some, the cub's eyes brightened, some are permitted, like we were permitted. You taught us sharing, Blixnor said. We teach others. This is also sharing. Yes? All 3 cubs bowed their heads in the Raxlon sign of respect. Thank you for teaching, they said in unison. Thank you for trusting. Thank you for keeping Heartstone. The recording ended. Hollis discovered her vision had gone blurry. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear it. Herncole reached out and gently touched the gray rock in Hollis's hands. They are good cubs, she said quietly. They will be better adults, because humans showed them different way to be strong. She stepped back and addressed the entire auditorium. Raxalon culture is old, is proud, is based on survival through competition. Her voice carried to every corner of the chamber. But survival is not same as thriving. My offspring thrive. They are happier, healthier, more effective than cubs raised in traditional way. She paused, letting that sink in. I am ambassador because I choose different path, because I see that galaxy is changing, that cooperation between species is becoming more valuable than competition, that old ways, while honored, must adapt or become extinct. Herncole looked back at Hollis. This human did not change my species. She gave 3 cubs permission to be themselves, to trust their instincts for cooperation, to believe that strength can look different than tradition says. The ambassador turned and began walking back to her seat. That, she said, over her shoulder, is most dangerous teaching of all, and most necessary. She sat down. The auditorium erupted. Questions flew from every direction, scholars arguing, representatives demanding data, the whole beautiful chaos of academic discourse unfolding at maximum volume. Hollis stood at the podium, holding a gray rock that 3 predator cubs had given her because she'd been reckless enough to share something shiny, and felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. Someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then the whole room was applauding, not just for the research, but for the sheer absurdity of it all. For the idea that maybe, just maybe, the way forward in a galaxy full of competing species wasn't more competition. It was 3 cubs and a human in a den during a dust storm, learning that giving away what you value most could create something more valuable than any resource. It was cooperation hidden in the cracks of competitive cultures, waiting for permission to bloom. It was recognizing that the best gifts aren't the ones with objective worth. They're favorite rocks, freely given, gratefully received, and cherished long after logic says they should be forgotten. That night, back in her quarters, Hollis sat at her desk with the gray rock resting in front of her. The station hummed around her. Thousands of beings from dozens of species living and working in close proximity, cooperation on a scale that would have seemed impossible a generation ago. Her comm panel chimed. Personal message. High priority. She opened it. The video showed Hernkt, Blixnor, and Ptolemy in what looked like a training arena. Behind them, she could see other cubs, maybe 15 or 20, working together on complex hunting simulations, sharing, cooperating, thriving. Researcher Hollis, Blixnor said, older now, voice deeper, "We wanted you to see. Cooperation is spreading, slowly, but spreading." Many adults still disapprove, Hernkt added, but they cannot argue with results. Cooperative hunting groups are outperforming traditional competition groups by significant margins. Polimi moved closer to the camera. "We tell them about you, about human who gave us Herningsee and asked for nothing, who showed us that sharing creates bonds stronger than fear or competition." All 3 cubs touched the blue crystal cluster together. "We tell them," they said in unison, "that strength is not always standing alone. Sometimes strength is knowing when to reach out." The recording shifted, pulling back to show the full training arena. Cubs working in teams, adults watching with expressions ranging from disapproval to cautious interest. And in the center of it all, 3 adolescents who had learned about sharing from a human in a storm. "We keep Hernsey," Blixnor said. "You keep Heartstone. Both gifts, both sacred, both reminders that galaxy is better when we choose connection." The recording ended with all 3 cubs bowing their heads. Hollis picked up the gray rock, smooth and warm in her palm, and smiled. In a galaxy full of species who'd clawed their way to the stars through competition and conquest, somehow it had taken the universe's most shameless sharers to demonstrate that the best path forward might just be giving away your lunch and accepting a rock in return. She placed the stone back on her desk where she could see it every day. Some gifts were priceless precisely because they had no price at all.